Eisenhütte Feinstein, another installation or entry for the Hasidic Nurses Notes. Today is the 30th day of June, 2026, and interesting enough, the 15th day of the month of Tammuz. Why I say interesting? Because I mentioned before, the lunar calendar versus the solar calendar. And today being the 15th of the month would mean there should be a full moon out tonight. Okay. And would be the middle of the month. For us, the smallest or the moon where you can't see it at all, and it just shows up, that's the first of the month. So today we are approaching a holiday called the 17th of Tammuz, which is not a happy day. It's when the Romans had breached the walls of Jerusalem, uh, and with the eventual destruction of the temple 9 days or 17 days later, 3 days later, on the ninth of the month of Av. So this is called a minor fast day, although it's not a 24-hour or 26-hour fast. But it's from the first light till dark. So this time of year, that's a fairly long day. And so going for that with the talking about not happy occasions, the world is in a tough time. I guess when is it not in a tough time? But I think this things are very visible in media. Of course, we don't know exactly what is truly going on everywhere. Nevertheless, some things seem to be self-evident. So building on that, that historically the Jewish people, I say their existence is sort of in some ways on like a sine wave, go down, up and down, and good times and hard times. And usually it's within a generation or so. I had to describe one time in one class that uh, things are going very, very well, and people get complacent, kick other interests, susceptible to other influences, and they go downhill from there until they go really, really down. Things get worse, unfortunately, and we have Torah portions reflect that. Um, we recently had one called Balak, where we had a non-Jewish prophet who was contracted by a king of Moab to curse the Jews because the king of Moab saw that the Jews were really coming forward uh, across the desert and going to occupy the land of Israel. And the Moabite king was very frightened, although the prophecies had predicted that we were not to touch Moab because Moab actually was the son of Lot, who was a nephew of Abraham. And so he was kind of, has a heter or a protection, but he didn't realize that fear overcame him, among other things. And in this situation, the prophet Bilam, was his name, um, he himself was no friend of the Jews from a long time history. The Medrash is not, you're not going to get from the Torah direct verses, but he was an advisor to Paro or Pharaoh at the adjunct of the slavery. And he had three advisors. One advised that he shouldn't do anything to the Jews, harmful to the Jews, because he was nervous because the Jewish population was growing. So he thought they would take the side of the enemy, which is contrary to Jewish ways. We're supposed to support the kingdom uh, in present that we're living under. Um, and that's, you'll find that mentioned in Pirkei Avos, support the kingdom in existence, because without it, things are going to get worse. I think that's been historically proven. The many revelations we've seen, revolutions that we've seen. Nevertheless, Bilam instructed Pharaoh to be hard on the Jews. And one of the advisors expected or advised Pharaoh to be good to the Jews, and his name was Yisro or Jethro. Turned out to be the father-in-law of Moshe. Uh, his daughter Zipporah was was Moses' wife. And then there was another one who remained silent, didn't give his opinion, and he didn't do too great with that. That was Eob or Job, as the Medrash points out. So Bilam was ready to go and ready to give his advice and his services to Bilam, to Bilam, and subsequently to Balak, the king of Moab. And Hashem was not really in favor of that, but Bilam was bent on it. He tried to connive his way into the ability to curse the Jews. So an interesting point comes up that Balak had sent emissaries to Bilam to encourage him to or come and to curse the Jews. And Bilam said to the emissaries of Balak that wait here tonight, let me speak to Hashem and see what's fine. And in a dream, Hashem told him, it's not in the cards to to curse the Jews because they're blessed. Uh, in the beginning of the conversation with God and Bilam, God said to Bilam, "Who are these people that are with you?" Which God's is we're creating God's image, and from our own actions we can learn about God and learn His ways, and we can learn from God's ways is manners. So God didn't just come into the conversation and said, I know what these guys are here for, and forget it. He said, who are these people? And given Bilam a chance to respond, and maybe even favorably. So Bilam, with his greed and his envy and his hate, um, said, hey, God doesn't know everything. He asked me, who are these people? He should know. So he took that little thread of, I would say, um, dignified conduct presented by God and chose to look at that as a weakness. And therefore, he pursued for the opportunity to curse the Jewish people. Again, as I mentioned, you'll see trends that we can use in our everyday life coming from the Torah passages and the Torah stories. They're not just Bible stories. Um, can talk about a dinner table, which is great, but it's also not a football game where you shut it off and you go about your business. It's something as a teaching. So here's one that people who are really bent on doing what's wrong, um, that Hashem lets the evil in the world um, have a chance to convince them. He wants to do it, I'll give him a chance, even though he discouraged them initially. Take that bit of information for yourselves that what always appears to the eye is not always an opportunity. And therefore, Bilam went on and he tried to curse the Jewish people, and he did everything you do as a prophet to set it up, and it just didn't happen. Opposite, God put blessings into Bilam's mouth. And Bilam was a prophet, so a prophet speaks the words of God, and he doesn't make up his own agenda, although he tried to influence. So he took this opportunity, and it didn't work. And finally, he said, I have to, I have some big bucks invested in this and some good guarantees. I got to find a way to show Balak good faith that I really tried to influence him. So what he came up was a trick or a scheme where he would use the daughters of the Moabites and the daughters of the Midianites. These are the two nations who had joined together to fight the Jews. And remember, fighting as we know it was not an option. If those who have read, the Torah know that the Jews coming out of Egypt defeated many powerful nations, especially when they're approaching coming into Israel. The one of Sichon, who was king of Bashan, Og, Melech, king of Og Melech Bashan, and king and Sichon, king of the Amorites. Very powerful nations, and the Jewish people had defeated them. So this is why they came to Balaam as a prophet, because they realized that out and out war tactics do not work in this circumstance, that God is fighting for the Jews. And therefore, they have to come up with another way. And they did some research into Moses, and they went actually to Midian, where he spent many years, and they found out that Moses' power was in his mouth, his communication, his blessings from God, giving the blessings of God. So therefore, that's why they sought out a prophet. So I'm running around in circles a bit around the story, but it's jam-packed with useful information, I believe, and I think you should see it. That again, not all forms of combat with adversaries work. They work for a while, they work for a time, depends on situations, but sometimes a whole reversal, even nonviolent. You've heard the term the pen is mightier than the sword, and from it was the Dark Ages of the Renaissance. It was a famous story from then. But there are times, for example, I mean, in the old days, there was a story. I mean, I only knew about it because I saw the movie when I was a little kid. I was petrified in the 50s, the World War of the Worlds. And invaders had come to the country with massive raids, and all of our military and the power of the military totally ineffective against them. And there was desperation. People were ready to give up. And there's more stories to that we won't delve into. But nevertheless, what came? Some inconspicuous, innocuous thing that the people of the world, of Earth, were not really concerned about, but decimated the invaders, and that was disease. So you can see this picture repeats itself, and this is history. And Torah, many times you'll find that much of the history and many of the themes, you'll go back and you'll find it in Torah. So what they were hoping to defeat the Jews was not military, but a curse. And Balaam could not summon up a curse, so he gave some really sleazy advice that he got the daughters of Midian and Moab, the leadership agreement of the leadership there, to come out and entice the Jews in a form of prostitution. And although, as we know, that adultery is one of the seven mitzvahs, they used that as a enticement to bring the Jewish soldiers to bow down to their idols. Now, what's my goal? Oftentimes, I mention with being involved with a Noahide. Um, Again, it's the basics are essential to anything, and I know a lot of you have been through the basics and seen the basics. Again, I recommend this book. There's others, but this has helped me a lot in my introduction to Noahide and some explanations. So, in going into some of the basics, again, you have the adultery. And if you look into the book, you'll see there's some things, relationships, although they are not well looked upon, they don't necessarily fall into the definition of the serious implications of adultery. I mean, there's some that some people take for granted are okay, and they do. So it's worth reading, finding out. I'm not going to do it with this class, but this is one subject where actually um, I notice people don't like to get involved with, talking in public or with their families. And it's understandably so, but I want to take this opportunity to say that anything that has to do with that the kids, children, and young people, especially nowadays, are hearing about it before you're even thinking if they know about it. Um, Even before teenage pregnancies and other things. So you think I think about you as a parent or a guiding person to approach this subject because the results of misconduct with adultery are disastrous for family, individuals' mentality, kind of abuse, child abuse, sexual abuse, and I don't know in this modality on these presentations that I should be on the pulpit, but I'm doing this for the benefit of the children, the benefit of the families. And I mentioned before that I worked with a social worker, and I was a social worker myself. Actually, I worked the United States Health Department, and when I came out of college, and the thing I was a case investigator was sexually transmitted diseases. So I don't have to tell you that. By the way, because I was in that position, people were contacting me back about where they can find an abortion. And this was before abortion was legalized. I go way back. And unwanted pregnancies and unwanted relationships and how to break them. Remember the 50s, the 60s, up to the late 60s, everything was meeting somebody, falling in love, breaking up, making up. And I think that seemed to change around the late 60s when one of the social revolutions were occurring. But nevertheless, the undercurrent, there is a need for children to hear proper way and proper conduct. So now I come to a point. I said there's trans formulas, algorithms in Jewish learning that what you'll find, especially with Noachic, because everything, the laws are very, very down to earth. Um, that if we don't pay attention to the morality and the ethics, and the values that are presented by theology, especially the Noahide, it will be eventually trapped in that quagmire of permissibility with the results we didn't expect or couldn't hope to control. So many times in life, you'll find one finds themselves in situations where, like, how did I get into this? And it falls back to that I really, the core, the source of either prevention or dealing with the matter or seven laws of Noah and the like, the related offshoots. So I can't emphasize this enough. If I would say that's one of the real reasons I'm involved with that is to make your lives better, to avoid going through the trial and error period it takes when a person has no real organized or tried and true systems of values and ethics and morality. At least give the person the opportunity to know it from the begin with. And when a person is faced with a situation, maybe for the first time, and say, hey, wait a second, there is a problem with this I learned about. Doesn't seem so monumental in my eyes what I'm doing, um, just with the people I'm doing it with, and later to find out like really stepped into a pit and it could have been avoided. So going on with that I don't look at the Noahide as just presenting laws, and people follow the laws, and people be good in a good society, which is, of course, critical and necessary. But at this day and age now, I put a lot of emphasis and a lot of faith in the people who are involved or getting involved with the Noahide. Even though it's not a formal doctrine at this moment, so we get back what they call the Jubilee, the Ovel, when the great temple will be restored in the Sanhedrin. Never the doctrine still exists. That it's critical now that the masses of people now are susceptible to unbelievable influences, harsh influences, and why? Because they're frustrated. They don't know what the alternatives are, and and they don't know what's available to them, or they don't even know that something's right or wrong. In a secular society, who's to say what's right or wrong? Eventually, who has the right to make this law? So I have a lot of confidence in the positions of the Noahide in this day and age. Now you say, well, Noahide's been in existence for day one, was from the giving of the Torah. And there are many things that have been in existence, but we really haven't come to the point where their noteworthiness has been so evident. Uh, Times change. I mean, there was always oil around, but I don't know if people were able to access it in the old days or create an engine, or I guess you can make a steam engine out of anything that burns. But many things that we're using today, which people take for granted, were available in the old days. But there were other preferences that were easier to obtain, easier to deal with. And, I remember when I grew up in my neighborhood, there were still coal-fired furnaces. And still people have in the wilderness wood-fired stoves. I remember seeing a wood-fired stove actually in an old house. And, and they actually used it. They're older, older sisters. And so now comes a time where Noakai really, um, I think you should take a confidence in the fact that you are in a key position. You can reach out into circles other people can't. People don't really want to convert, so they're looking for an alternative. Judaism may be too much for them. I know that other people want it. It's difficult to convert. So where do they go? I even know my own people don't. They're saying, well, maybe we need to convert people now. And they don't know the availability of Noahide. So I think that you're in a tremendous position, not just to learn, get close to God, but to organize and know that you yourselves are a living example to others. You may not realize it. And I've had people who, once they become, able to resist certain things and pursue certain things, people come to them and said, I really respect what you're doing. I need to know more. So I believe that people who are watching this, and I hope that people who are watching this realize that I don't look at as a flag to, hey, join Noahide. Um, oh, yeah, and if people stumble upon it and use it, great. But I look at this as a cadre of people who are very essential to the world, should be in partnership in some form with the Jewish people, because God's plan, and I think those who are learning see the extent of the learning and the depth that Orthodoxy requires from us and the commitment, um, which is not necessary, but it has its meaning. So I'm going to make it short. It's already long, but I went into one subject of the Noahide laws of adultery, or just glazed over it. But I want I believe it is a very important one because it's sort of glazed over. Embarrassment, or does it really matter? Ask any child to come from a divorce. Uh, Um, there was a young man that shot up a whole school, and they found that his family background was horrible, and his life skills or the opportunity to develop life skills were non-existent. So, as I mentioned before, there's a statement from the Talmud: if you save one person, it's as if you saved the world. Well, it's not necessarily so abstract, and that one person is you. You're doing more than a lot of people. Not not only not being a detriment to society, but being an advantage to society. So please try to attend a class, pick up a book, go on a website, um, and I invite you to come back to these classes if you feel that they're of use to you. And I appreciate those who are looking in. And one other mention to clarify or reinforce, I know a person very well who, a long story short, was put into prison because of business activities, and circumstances we feel was very unfair. And he had a lot of appeals. There were a lot of people looking out for him. There were petitions, high-powered, figures, but it just didn't work. And after a number of years in prison, he said, "Looks like I'm here for the duration." And he said that realization, he said, all the tangible worldly mechanisms have been used. And therefore, I am not in a position to have to like pursue every little um, suggestion that comes up. You can leave no stone unturned. The only thing that's left to me now is belief in God and how He runs the world, and how prayer and good deeds influence Him. And it was kind of a relief. He didn't look years ahead what was going to happen. He looked at today and says, I now have a free and clear path. Put everything I have into my relationship with God, because He did a lot of work for mankind. And again, He pursued a lot of channels. A lot of channels were pursued for Him. At that moment, he felt a certain relief, hard as it is to believe. And thank God, wasn't very long after he did receive a release from that situation. So if anybody's looking at the world picture and sees all the power of the military is still not reversing the trend, and not only that, there are sociological, theological threats which are encroaching the world. And if you turn off the news, whether you believe everything you see or if you think you don't, you can, you probably have done a great step, because then you'll say, I'm in a position to influence God. And at this point, everything else is being tried with not obvious success. So therefore, I at least have this opportunity. And the Holy One, blessed be He, and I can develop a relationship, then I can be the one that makes an effect in the world. God should bless you all.